Picking games or projects to do next for my channel is always a bit of a struggle. For you see, there are many games I want to play, but it's always random what I feel like playing. Therefore, despite a video might showing success and the channel growing on one particular game, I usually move away from it right afterwards, cause I got distracted by another game that I feel like playing. Now, yes, we are getting to the point that series of games get completed on this channel, which is great! Some are getting there eventually, and some I would like to complete, but they will never be, because they will keep making new ones every single year, so the nightmare will never end. Looking at you, Sword Art. However, last week I did feel like playing a Sword Art Online game. But as the new one is right around the corner, again, I had to dive into my long list of games to find something similar. Which brought me to Etearnights. So Etearnights seems to promise an experience that in terms of game design sounds similar to Sword Art Online games. And when I look at the trailer, it does look very promising. I mean, the combat looks good, the premise of interacting with characters is great, and the art style looks very cool. And what's this? You can hold hands with a girl? What? How is that possible? What kind of magic is this? Well, I'm sold. Let's not waste any more time and find out more. This is Eternights. Eternights takes place in an apocalyptic world where humans turned into vile creatures soon after an anti-aging drug was released to the public. In the final days of the world there is, however, hope. An 18-year-old single boy, using powers given by a mysterious woman, he fights against these creatures and tries to save the world. However, he's not alone in this endeavor. Together with his childhood friend and other survivors, he teams up, forms bonds with them, and aims to save the world but also lose his single status. To put it short, Eternights' story mixes zombie action adventure with romance/dating sim. Though when looking at the entire playthrough, I would say it leans heavily more to just being a dating sim, as there is clearly more focus on the characters and the bonds between them than the actual zombie apocalypse that happens outside. From the start of the game, the story is quickly set up, the stakes are clear, and from there the story takes the back seat and the interaction and the characters themselves take center stage. Which was a very good move, as that utilized the simplicity of the story premise very well and of course gave room for the characters to be developed. That does not mean the story being told here is particularly weak, it's just used differently as a strong baseline and theme for the characters themselves. Because obviously these characters went through certain struggles to survive the start of the apocalypse, and those events still have effect on them one way or another now. These events are discussed constantly and even cleverly used to elevate these characters beyond their stereotypical design. Especially in late game, this becomes apparent as you start to know these characters more personally and eventually date them. But because the story is mostly used to start off this crazy dating adventure and to elevate the characters, which again is its strength, it does leave a lot to be desired when it comes to depth and overall world building. At the end of the game, I was still left with many questions about the events I have seen unfold. And in particular, world building felt forgotten at the drawing table, as whatever unfolded in this game, it wasn't clear in what world it happened. It looked like ours, but in ways it seems to work and how people acted and such, it's not like ours whatsoever. It's just a very unfortunate byproduct of how the story is used. While Eternights is a dating sim and the goal clearly is...
We're bang, okay?
The game treats that as a side objective most of the time and focuses first and foremost to develop bonds between you and the other characters. This is done via interaction moments that mostly take place in between battles on the train. These moments are instigated by you or automatically happen as the days progress and cover many different topics, situations and events that you or the survivors got into. In these moments you get dialogue choices, and depending on what you pick you gain points in certain attributes. Once those reach certain levels and you're bond enough with one of the characters, you get to interact with them in a more intimate way. And it are these interaction moments where characters set themselves apart really quickly from just being cannon fodder dating sim waifus. Something that we are too familiar with on this channel. They felt like actual characters who were trying to make the best out of the situation they found themselves in, overcoming certain challenges created after the apocalypse started, but also find room to sometimes just be a teenager. It creates a nice atmosphere of friendship, good vibes and feelings, and just a joy to watch at times, which is a stark contrast to what is present outside of these four walls. And this constant switching between opposite tones probably is my favorite aspect of Eternights. Games set in an apocalyptic setting can feel very nice, but can start to feel very one tone very quickly, which is avoided here. It's also a very clever way of storytelling as the atmosphere constantly switches. Levels themselves aren't really memorable and even feel a little bit clumsy, like pre-made dungeon modules just glued together. But their atmospheres were very memorable, and again, just like with the tone and interaction, the switching elevated the entire experience. As you fight through hordes of creatures, the environment feels cold, empty and ominous all the time, making you want to return back to the warm and safe feeling of the train. But you also know you can't stay there forever in that warm, cozy situation, as you have to face the demons that wait outside. Which brings us to probably the best tone switch Eternights makes, and that is the combat. Eternights' combat system is a hack and slash with an emphasis on timing of dodging and parrying. Whereas in traditional hack and slash, the tactic of hitting it till it dies works and other aspects are given as an option in the combat system, here the other aspects are the option to beat your enemies. You can't just wail into your enemy as you please, it will not get you that far. Instead, you gotta get in somewhat of a rhythmic state and anticipate enemies' attacks so you can dodge it or parry them to defeat your enemies. And doing this is surprisingly easy and does not require high levels of timing, as the game not only offers you a decent time gap to do this, but the indication of both is given by the enemy. When an enemy charges up an attack, there is a flash of blue and red color, which indicates the perfect timing for a dodge or parry. All you gotta do now is anticipate it and strike. And when you manage to do so, it's freaking great. It does not matter if it are normal enemies or bosses. Whenever you time a dodge or pull off a parry right into a combo or a death strike, it just carries so much impact and feels so good when you floor enemy after enemy this way. And as you progress in the game, your abilities get expanded on with new attacks, better rewards for timing and so on. But cleverly enough, it does not lose this simplicity of the combat system that is established at the start. Everything until the very last boss leads back to the bare basics of the combat system that is established at the start. Therefore meaning that if you want to beat the game, you need, and most likely will, master this part of the combat system throughout your entire playthrough. And that is something that I absolutely love of Etearnights. It's a progression curve that is not only more noticeable, but gives more satisfaction than any number of stats can ever give. There are of course some numbers involved with the progression, but they are all capped at a very but good minimal. Your character has stats that you can improve as you play through the game, but instead of using a skill tree or leveling system, they again incorporated the interacting and dating aspect of the game. As you improve your friendship with characters, you unlock better special moves and options to improve certain stats like health, attack or defense. This is a good way to combine and promote interaction with all characters instead of hyper-focusing on one. But that is where it more or less ends when it comes to stats, and I'm happy that it ends there and that the number game is kept overall very low, and that the game depends more on your skill to beat enemies and overcome challenges. But don't misunderstand, the game is very forgiving and offers a decent gap to time, dodges and parrying. Of course, higher difficulty means more punishing, but even on normal difficulty, this game is surprisingly fair, forgiving and easy. You don't have to be very good at it to beat it. What is required of you is mostly just a little bit of patience. Because if you have a bad day or can't really get into the rhythm of a boss battle, you will probably lose. And when that happens, there's a degree of frustration building up. As when it happens a couple of times in a row, you know there's not a lot of things you can do about it. There's no real form of builds that you can change or equip better gear or something that will change the battle in your favor. You'll lose and will win only if you get the timing right. Again, that is something I liked of this game, as it shows a true form of progression, but at the same time, I understand that for some it can be a turn off. Eternights does offer an easy mode, and to be fair, playing it on easy mode will give you a lot more room for error. At that point, the most challenging part of the game are timing the QTEs correctly. Still, for a dating sim, having this type of combat system connected to it was a very unexpected surprise, but a welcome one. Timing is however not exclusive to just the combat, as the game has a day and night cycle. At first I thought it was very similar to other games that use an active timer in their games, like Persona or recently reviewed Final Fantasy XIII-3. This caused me to min-max the absolute most out of my day, defining the day in fighting and making small steps of progression in the current stage and interacting with characters in between those moments. Always aiming to beat the final stage just before the days ran out. In hindsight, that was a very bad call, and later in my playthrough I changed my pacing of the days with doing many interactions in a row and then just complete the entire stage and then do the other interactions with the time that remains. As the days might look and are presented like a timer, they are basically just a counter of possible actions you can do at that stage. Once you beat the fight portion of the game, you will still have the remaining days to do whatever you want until the timer runs out. This was kinda disappointing, as obviously it's an interesting mechanic, and it not working as expected or presented heavily impacted the story pacing itself. But it could be worse, as the design does still favor the main idea of interacting and dating these characters. So I don't consider it to be a problem, just a waste of potential. And I just wish the game told me this instead of me finding out later down the line. But those are just little bitty things about the game. Overall, Eternights is a great experience that managed to constantly switch tones, be that in gameplay, story or atmosphere. Especially the latter one was really great, but it does not overshadow the simplistic but satisfying combat system, or the nice, wholesome and fun interaction with characters or the dating aspect. It has some rough edges here and there, especially near the end of the game, but nonetheless, it's a very solid, nice connected, short experience, and I definitely recommend this game, as playing it was just a good time and I had a blast with it.